Okay, well, thanks for coming along. I'm not the main part of this at all, and I'm very privileged to introduce somebody who has inspired me and many of us here today. So Bruce.
Thank you very much, Will. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. And there's also Basil. So Bruce will be coming along hopefully at around 10 o'clock. We have a talk from Jamie Douglas from Resilient after my talk, and hopefully we'll have time for questions and answers from Bruce himself. So I published a top 10 of the people who inspired me in computer science. It's only my top 10, and you all have your own top 10. These are the people who inspire me. If we're not inspired by people in our work, then we've really got to worry. My number 10, do you know who that is? Scott, yeah. Scott, Sun Microsystems, long-loved company. He was right, the network is the computer. It's the end game. The computer is now the network. The cloud is now the network. That's it. He was right, and he made a great company that doesn't exist anymore, but a wonderful company. He created Java too. My number 9, who's that? Sorry, this isn't you're in a university, so you're going to have to use to be tested. There'll be a full exam after this. Who's that? Ron Rivest. Yeah, that's Professor Ron Rivest. And we're here because of him. And who's that? Bill Gates. And Bill Gates was great at strategy, of course. There's no need, we'll need more than 64K of memory at all. The great thing with Bill was that he kind of got it wrong, got it right. You used to wait to version, I don't know, 3 or something with Microsoft projects before you knew that something was actually right. And dearly departed Steve Jobs. Yeah, what a cool computer that is. A wooden computer. You had to varnish it to make sure it was okay. The Apple II computer. What a wonderful brain for detail that he had. And then Grace Hooper, she discovered the first bug, which was a bug and was a moth. And then, above that, who's that? There you go. Who's that? Who's that? That's Ralph. Ralph Merkel. Ralph Merkel, if you read that there, that Project One is rather garbled and doesn't make much sense. What he was proposing to his professor was public key encryption. The professor just couldn't see what he was saying. And the basis of blockchain, basically this guy here, the Merkel tree. What a wonderful brain that we have. And who's that? Whitfield Diffie. Whitfield Diffie created this paper here and kind of says new directions in cryptography. This is the basis of virtually all of security ever since. My top 3, Douglas Engelbert. I had to print it there. Where would you find him? Or where was he? Xerox, the Xerox Park Lab. This guy here went along to meet this guy, and he changed his viewpoint on everything. He created Ethernet, the GUI, the mouse, and so on, all in that lab. Steve Jobs saw it and says, that's the future. Number 2 is Audi Shamir, the S in RSA, long-term commitment to cryptography. And number one, of course, is Bruce. You knew I was going to say that. I couldn't say anything else. And why? Because he published that book there. And the reason I'm here just now, I know there's lots of biological reasons that I'm here now. Let's forget about that. The reason I'm standing here as a professor of cryptography is because of that book. I read a chapter on public key encryption, and I read it again, and read it again, and again. And I remember the point at which I was reading it And this guy told me that there was an old world and there was a new world. And that new world was based on public key encryption. And it changed my viewpoint on everything. I'd still be teaching data comms and networks if it wasn't for that guy. And then he started to say things that I really saw that he wasn't on the side of governments and so on. He was on the side of the citizens. He decided that he wanted to make some sort of contribution to our society. And he says things like this: cryptography might be banned by countries in the world, but you can't suppress knowledge. You can't take mathematics away. And the laws of a country might be one thing, but mathematics is another thing. And then he even produced papers like this. Look at the author list on that. Does that not make you drool? And that was these guys saying to government, stop mucking about with technology. Look after someone. We live in a flawed world. Let's have a better world, and let's use mathematics and cryptography at the core. And it was really that book. And then this paper came along, a classic paper from Ron Rivest, Schneier, and Alderman. There's them there before they advanced in years. Lovely blackboard there. What I like about this paper is that this is what they published. 74 years to factorize 100 digits. My laptop can do it in 0.5 seconds. So things move on, and what was secure then isn't secure now. But we're still using RSA, and it's worked for 40 odd years. And they were the first to introduce A and B and Alice and Bob. And then Bruce came along, so there's Alice and Bob. Sorry to scare you a little bit there. And I don't know if that was the movie that inspired them. Anybody seen that movie? No, there you go. Don't see that movie, please. I don't think it looks like a good representation. So we do a lot of encryption here. We introduce Bob and Alice. We tell stories. I realized as a cybersecurity person, I tell stories. And we all tell stories. And that's what we do as a profession. We talk about Bob and Alice and Eve and Trent and so on. And we've even built up all our animation, all our things, and we try to explain this wonderful thing called public key encryption. And clowns can be nice. Who likes clowns? No one. One person. Who doesn't like clowns? Everybody. Okay, that's your picture. I don't know why we picked a clown for Eve, but it kind of stuck from there. So Bruce was the guy who introduced lots of different characters within cybersecurity so that we could tell our tales to the world. We could explain things. Can somebody spot some of the characters? Just shout out. Victor is one, the verifier. Frank is another one, yeah. Oh, who's it? Oscar. Oscar is another one. Yeah, any more? Miss Piggy. Yeah, that wasn't one of them. It's Peggy. Sorry, I couldn't find Peggy. So I went for Miss Piggy there. You could know this guy here. Dave, yeah. So that was what he did. Craig the passwords, Cracker, Chuck, Dave, and so on. So Bruce was the one who presented these characters to the world, and we've all kind of stuck. And it makes us sound more human. We're not machines that talk about G to the power of X mod P. I can't talk about that if you want. But we talk about Bob and Alice and Chuck and Dave and Victor, and just such a wonderful area to be in. So I don't like when I get asked in Starbucks for my name on a coffee cup. So sometimes I do give away my name, but other times I call myself Victor and Dave and Walter. And I went, my name is Bubblies, you know. I'm Italian, you know, I like my coffee in the morning. As an Italian, I probably wouldn't be in Starbucks, but that's another story. I know, I couldn't say Alice. No, my name is Bubblies. I said, my name is Carol, and they gave me a K instead of a C, which I thought was quite nice. And then I said I was Trent, I was trusted. And then I said, my name is Bobby, you know. And they wrote Bobby. Spell it, oh, B-O-B-E-V. And I said, and then I'd said my name was Mallory, and I think they were on to me by then. You see a little smiley face. Nobody's called Mallory. And then I said I was Eve, and they gave me Steve. I thought it was really good. So please try to go to Starbucks and say that you're Eve and photograph it if you can. I quite like this one. I had 3 boys, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, I have 3 wonderful boys. So I couldn't call my kids Bob and Alice and Eve. I wouldn't want to call her Eve, by the way, so don't do that. So if you've got two girls and a boy, then maybe think about Bob, Alice, and Eve for those 3. And it's a kind of funny world, and it's a funny world, and it was these guys here who showed that we could be living in a different world. The dearly departed Timothy May was one of these guys. So he wrote something like this about the CryptoPunks and how we could actually build a more citizen-focused world that didn't involve corporations, money, profit, and so on. And when you read some of the things he says, they really are kind of coming true in a world. If we see Libra, Facebook is going to be released next week for the first time. A seller will be able to link back an advertisement. That's a kind of scary world that we live in. So we're rebuilding just now around cryptography, and it's obviously becoming an important part of it. And it's unlikely that we're ever going to be able to halt the rise of cryptography as this new world that we're actually creating. And hopefully it will create a better world in there, and it might break down government controls, control of fiat currency, and so on. But it's a scary world, and we need to make sure that we're building it properly from there. And I like this one in here. It says that the printing press changed the world, and it did. It advanced, but there was many people that thought the printing press was a bad thing, and they tried to destroy it. Cryptography and what we're building actually has the opportunity to fundamentally change the nature of corporations and government interference in economic transactions. And that's a new world that we're building. So hopefully you'll enjoy the presentation today. And I'm going to hand on to Jamie Douglas now, who's going to give us some automation debate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good morning. I'm Jamie Douglas, not Bruce Schneier, unfortunately, so you're going to have to wait about 20 minutes or so. And I've been asked to just frame the automation debate. For those of you in information security as we are, automation is without a doubt the key hype cycle we're going through at the moment. As a skeptical information security practitioner myself, I have some challenges and some frustrations with that. So hopefully the course of the next 20 minutes or so provides some food for thought before handing over to Bruce, who'll provide his unique view on the wider market today. So my name is Jamie Douglas. What do I do? So I work for IBM, particularly within the security practice, and I head up our threat management business here in the UK, which comprises predominantly our QRadar SIEM platform, resilient orchestration platform, and our I2 investigations platform. And our job really is to help organizations deal with the chaotic world they live in, particularly with cybersecurity operations. So the world we do live in, and I don't think it's a stretch for me to say it's pretty chaotic. Right, we're in a world now at the moment where it's well understood that the adversaries are well-skilled, advanced, and we've been banging that drum for a number of years now. But if I'm an information security practitioner who has some money and some dollars to spend on technologies and services to help me overcome our challenges, I look to a market where there, at latest counts, are approximately 3,000 vendors offering services in our space. 3,000. To put that into perspective, if you and your partner are pregnant and decide that we now need to upsize our car, and you drive down to your local motor retail park, and there are 3,000 vendors to choose from. And each of those vendors have more than one model. Okay, so the market is dictating some chaos here for us because there are 3,000 sales teams, 3,000 marketing teams, 3,000 product teams, all pushing and pitching their angles. So from a SOC, if you look at that internally now, on average, again, the research says about an average of 50 different tool sets that we are using in our security operations environment today. That's 50. And then the research dictates as well, more than 50% of those are neither deployed correctly or utilized properly. Again, not a stretch. Right? If you're an information security analyst, are you expected to understand 50 different tool sets, their interfaces, how they work, what you're expected to use them for? So we operate in a chaotic world, but the good news is the market and these 3,000 vendors have come up with a solution to your problem, right? And that's automation. Okay, so don't worry, we can automate this. You've got different products, we'll make sure they talk to each other, we'll provide you with some APIs, and off you go. For those of you fortunate enough to attend InfoSec a couple of years ago, and my first InfoSec was 15 years ago, showing my age a bit, but the show pales in comparison to what it once was. Everyone was talking about automation on the stand. Everyone looked the same, talked the same messages. So it's difficult and confusing. But we as consumers of technology believe the hype. Looking at what we have to do, I mean, this will be familiar to everyone. But when we look at automation, okay, if we accept that we're going to automate, where do we start? This is a traditional, as we know, and we know we're evolving to data, multi-platform, multi-environment. What are we automating? Are we going to automate everything? Where's our data? Which platforms are we using? We might use Azure. We might use AWS as well. We might use software. We might use all of them at the same time, each with their own unique way of dealing with infrastructure, querying infrastructure, APIs, etc. That's a challenge. Right? Automation is great, but we do that. So I think when you look at the volume of attacks we're dealing with, we look at the environments we're dealing with, we have to, right? We cannot no longer employ an army of people. We have to use technology. We have to automate. And I think we can all agree, security must accelerate, and automation is a key component of that. But my problem is we cannot do it at the introduction of risk to your organization. Now, there is a caveat there, right? You can introduce risk, provided that risk is understood, and that risk is agreed to be taken on by the business. A risk-based decision. For those of you studying information security or in information security, you've heard that before as well. But in practice, that's very, very difficult. So automation is great, very capable, but with power comes great responsibility. And it can be very dangerous as well. So I'll provide you with a real-world example. And I think the challenge for us on the vendor side is that we have to upmarket, outsell to get our message heard. And if we go into an organization, so we've been working for the last 2 years with a large financial services client, a global insurance provider. This was their expectation. Right? They had multiple SOCs around the world, and each was doing its own thing. There was no common reporting. The head of operations was given lots of money, but he had no way of reporting back to the business what they were actually doing. Right? Chaos, frankly. So they recognized the need that they had to build something central, bring everything together, and have a central framework, a central way of dealing with incidents in order for them. But they came to the market, and here's what they were after. Hey, we want to automate everything. We want it out the box and deployed instantly. We want to do this on premise because that's the most secure way to do things. And hey, we want reporting and metrics. I see this all the time. Right? And when we see this from organizations, we know two things. One, they don't understand the problem they're facing. And secondly, they don't understand what they're trying to achieve. But that's the reality of what the market's saying. This is what our marketing is telling you right now. At InfoSec, this is what's promised to you. We had a vendor come in and promise them we'll automate 75% of your process. We can do that for you, no problem. The problem there is, again, twofold. Firstly, that's not true. And secondly, the companies are not challenging the vendors. So my challenge to you is, if someone comes in and claims to be able to automate everything, please challenge them. Call them out, because it's just not true. right? The reality of what we're dealing with. You cannot automate everything. Unless your processes are defined, your structures are defined, you will not be able to understand what your opportunities for automation are. And that's hugely important. We live in a world which is very dynamic and very agile. Think of where automation is used today. A good example is cloud services. I want to provision a server, I click a button, seconds later that server is provisioned. When we're building that infrastructure, very, very straightforward. We have certain outcomes. We know someone's going to click a button, and when they do, we know what that outcome is going to be. Lots and lots of certainty. And Bruce talks about this in some of his blogs as well. It's easy to automate when there's certainty. How often, when we get a ping from our detect platform or our detection platform, do we know what the outcome of that alert is going to be? I'd argue never. Right? A single malware incident can quickly evolve into a combined attack, a phishing attack with some ransomware. You never know where that's going to go until you start looking at it. So how do you automate that? You cannot. Okay? By defining your process and breaking down, where are the certainties in that process? Well, there is a certainty. Every time we have a user account in an incident, we look up Active Directory or our LDAP, and we pull back that value to understand who they are. That is a certain process within our operations. So let's automate that. And we do that very successfully. Okay? But you can't automate that overall process. Secondly, which key applications are we using that's going to help drive that process? Right? As vendors, we are driven. 3 years ago, we had no applications in our app store. Today, we've got hundreds. Do our customers really use all of those? Frankly, no. We've had to do it because that's what the market dictates. Out-of-the-box integrations. But if you're using your process and defining your process, in our most mature clients, and I'm talking organizations, you think of next generation SOC, they've got the next of the next generation. They've got all the money, all the resource, all the tools, and all the people under the sun. Right? They are maybe using max 20 to 25 integrations to drive their automation processes. It's the key stuff that they're doing. Okay? So really understanding our process, understanding our infrastructure, and where those opportunities lie was key. This one was a huge surprise for me. Right? We have had a SaaS offering for a number of years, and obviously lots of other vendors do. I was not expecting that a large financial services client would go down the SaaS route. But when you look at, again, we live in an agile world, for them to provision a server internally to deploy a response platform was going to take them 6 months. To make changes to that as you're driving a dynamic environment and building automations and building integrations, you cannot wait 6 months. Right? By the time 6 months come and you've built something to defend WannaCry, that's long gone. Okay? So they actually ended up going down the cloud for rapid deployment and provide them that agility. So it certainly opened our eyes. But the other thing was that network which they deploy into was intermittent at best. They were having some challenges. So if your response framework goes down with your network, how can you respond? So we're seeing now more of adoption of this inward-facing, it's secure, outward-facing, and leveraging those agile technologies. And from a reporting front, this is hugely frustrating. Again, people say, hey, can you do reporting? Yes, we can. What reports are you after? We don't really know. We just want some reporting. That's what we've been told. Right? It's focusing on what key behaviors are you trying to drive in your organization. For those of you in jobs today, you may have some KPIs or SLAs or metrics. As a salesperson myself, my key metric is how many dollars are you selling? Right? For a security analyst, what are you driving them to do? Is it response times? Is it volumes of alerts? Are we trying to change things? Once you understand what behaviors you're trying to drive in your security operations environment, you can then call out the reports that you actually need. And we've got some pretty interesting projects right now. One of my financial services clients, their key metric for this year, they want to reduce the time it takes from identifying a malware incident to containment by 50%. Okay, so they've got that metric. Now, they've had a platform in place for a number of years, so they actually understand what the current baseline is, and they're well on their way to doing that. Another organization, you have to respond to a phishing alert within 15 minutes. So there's all kinds of SLAs you can drive and behavior change you can drive, but what's key is understanding what are you trying to achieve. Okay, so our expectation versus reality, again, we have to be careful and I'm on the vendor side, right? But the marketing messaging we're pushing out and what you're seeing in the marketplace, the reality can be very different. So onto an analogy, really. This is a visual analogy, effectively. The 2018 Formula One pit stop looked very different to it does today. Right, I'll just run through. In today's world, we're looking at 2.5 seconds to get a car in and out the pits. At the top, 38 years ago, slightly different. Right. Now, the analogy here is the current security operations centers are the 1981 mode. And I actually even argue some of them aren't there. Because the top picture, while it's slow, it looks fairly frantic. It's not chaotic. Right? They still get the car in and the car out. What customers are coming to us for? They're wanting to buy 2019 out of the box. Right? They don't appreciate it's taken 38 years for Formula One to get to where they are today to get a car in and out 2.5 seconds. I've got plenty of clients who've got the pit crew, they've got the latest drills, the fanciest wheels. They don't have a car. Okay? They've invested products, but they haven't really had a goal to get through. Until you understand what you're trying to do and trying to achieve, and what your baseline for that process is, it's almost impossible to improve on. Okay, so automation is great. Automation is coming. The Gartner Security Conference took place this week in the US. The final keynote finished with, advice to security managers and risk managers. They have to use automation. You're going to use it. So it's coming. It's very powerful. It's very capable, but it brings risk if you go through it. Don't automatically take systems off the network. Don't automatically block user accounts unless there is that human oversight. Because when you get this right, and these are real-world examples, you can download the white papers, our customers are enjoying huge benefit of getting there. We've learned the hard way. We've had many customers who've tried to automate first, failed miserably, and come back to us. Right? And we've understood, and we've been on that journey with them. So focus on your process, understand your opportunities for automation, and you'll be in a much, much better place. But be wary, because it's coming, and everyone's going to be talking about it. So hopefully it's provided some food for thought. Now Bruce will talk a little bit more about this in his unique way, which we all enjoyed listening to. So I'd like to thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak to you. And I'll hand over to my colleague. Oh, you're going to introduce? So John McCann from Satisnet to introduce Bruce. It's okay. Bruce is wide.
Good morning, everybody. So just 3 minutes just to say who we are. So I am John McCann, Managing Director of Satisnet. We are an MSSP. For anyone who doesn't know the jargon, we essentially run SOCs, or Security Operations Centers. One of the topics today, our main focus, is around automation. We work very closely with Edinburgh Napier, have done now for the last 5 years, in the area of automation and training. So from what Jamie said, there's lots of tooling around now, lots of tools generally. He'd mentioned 5,000 or 3,000 vendors, whatever the number is. The key thing to say, it's a quagmire out there. We really focus here at Edinburgh and with our team on looking at automation, the processes, the people, the training. So we work very closely with the Cyber Academy, and we have a function called SOC Lab, which is almost like a pseudo SOC. It's not a real live SOC, where we run simulations, training, to help people understand security processes, train around them, learn tools like the IBM QRadar SIM, etc. So that's who we are. We have been an IBM partner for 10 years, effectively, ever since IBM really came into the information security space. And really, just to say, if you want to learn more about automation, how people and processes work, and how we're working with people to improve security, please come and visit us at the Cyber Academy. And then, without much further ado, this must be Bruce, because I recognize you vaguely from the internet. Hi, Bruce. I'd like to just introduce Bruce, and please put your hands together just to welcome him. Thank you.
Hey there, good morning. I started out this morning at the wrong location. Rumor has it that some of you did too. So I'm here. It is a surprisingly long walk from one to the other. I was promised it was a 15-minute walk. Hey, hi. All right. So I want to talk about really the future of our industry. I want to talk about what's going on in computer security, what's going on in computing, computer security, and how it affects us, and then a little bit of what I think are some of the big changes that are going to happen. And for what I want to start with is the notion that everything is a computer. We are now creating a world where everything is a computer. Right? So that iPhone in your pocket isn't really a phone, it is a small portable computer that happens to make phone calls. And to a very real extent, a modern refrigerator is a computer that keeps things cold. And a microwave oven is a computer that makes things hot. And an ATM machine is a computer with money inside. And a car used to be this mechanical device, and now it is a computer with 4 wheels and an engine. Or I guess really it is a 100-plus computer distributed system with 4 wheels and an engine. And this is true for things large and small. They are becoming computers with peripherals attached to them. It's more than the internet. You'll hear this called the Internet of Things. But really, it's much bigger than that. And this has some important lessons for us. It means that computer security is everything security, right? Because everything's computer. And all the lessons from our world are applicable to everything everywhere. So let me give 6 quick lessons from our world. The first is that most software is poorly written and insecure. Right? We know this. Software is lousy. Computer systems just barely work. It means, and some important things for us, well, I mean, I'll step back. I mean, the reason's economic, basically. No one wants to pay for quality software, with the exception of the space shuttle. You know, we prefer fast, cheap, and features over secure. Now, poor software is full of bugs. Some of those bugs are vulnerabilities. Some of those vulnerabilities are exploitable. Some of those are exploited. And you know, we are forever experiencing the litany of exploited vulnerabilities in the software we use. That is not changing. Second lesson is that the internet was never designed with security in mind. Now that seems absolutely crazy when I say it today. But if you think back to like the early 1980s, there were 2 things true about the internet. One, it wasn't used for anything important ever. And 2, you had to be a member of a research institution to get access to it in the first place. And for those 2 reasons, the designers of the internet deliberately decided to ignore security. And leave it to the endpoints, leave it to the application layer. And we're still living with the effects of that decision. In domain name security, internet routing, packet security, email addresses, right, again and again. The insecure protocols underlying the internet are stuff we're still stuck with, and we're trying to change it, and it's hard. Now, IPv6 is hard, BGP is hard, DNSSEC is hard. All of these things are hard to retrofit security into these core protocols. The third lesson is that the extensibility of computerized systems means that everything can be used against us. So extensibility is a property that we are used to in computers, the rest of the world is not. And basically means that you cannot constrain the functionality of a computerized device because it runs software. When I was a kid, I had a telephone, big black thing attached to the wall, great device. It could never be anything other than a telephone. That's what it was built to do. My new iPhone is a computer that makes phone calls. It can do whatever I want. There's an app for that. Remember Apple's first slogan. And that is an extensible device. It is a computer. This means we live in a weird world where refrigerators can send spam, where doorbells can be part of botnets because they're extensible. Now, right, it means other things for security. It's hard to test, right, because the functionality changes. And someone can drop malware on these devices in a way they couldn't before. The fourth lesson is about complexity. Right? The complexity of computerized systems means that attack is easier than defense. Right? And a lot of reasons why this is true, but basically complex systems are hard to secure. Computer systems are the most complex machines we use, and they are very hard to secure. And for the foreseeable future, the advantage will go to the attacker. Right? It's easier to attack a complex system than to defend it. The fifth lesson is that the interconnections themselves give us new vulnerabilities. As we connect things to each other, vulnerabilities in one thing affect another thing. And you'll see this when you, read some of the hacks in the news. Think of the dying botnet. Right? There were default passwords in CCTV cameras and DVRs. A lot of hackers to create a botnet, drop a domain name service, which dropped about 24 popular websites. It's that kind of cascade of vulnerabilities. There was a casino last year. I don't know the name of it. The name was never given. They were successfully hacked. Their payments networks hacked. And the attackers broke in through their internet-connected fish tank. And sometimes these vulnerabilities can be hard to fix because it's hard to know who's at fault. And those are sort of easy cascades, but there are times you have two secure systems, put them together, and you get an insecurity. My favorite example has to do with email addresses, Gmail, and I think Netflix. That in Gmail, the dots in your address are ignored, but normally dots are not ignored, and there are ways you can play that difference to attack systems. Who's to blame? Well, kind of nobody. It's sort of an emergent property of just this difference. And the sixth lesson is attacks can always get easier, better, and faster. And we know this, we're used to this, the rest of the world is not. And some of it is that computers just get faster. A good password 10 years ago may not be a good password today. Not because we're smarter at password guessing, we're just faster at it. But sometimes we are actually smarter. Attackers adapt, attackers figure out new techniques, and you have these arms races. Spam versus anti-spam, ATM machines versus ATM machine hacking, more recently deep fakes versus deep fake detection. And so what was secure before but is not secure today. And that expertise flows downhill, faster than you think. Right, today something can be a top secret NSA program, tomorrow it's somebody's PhD thesis, the next day it's a hacker tool. So we're always trying to catch up with technology. So none of this is new, right? None of the things I just said were new or different. What's different is what computers are doing, what they're attached to. And that, I think, is going to make all the difference. Let me pause for a housekeeping. There's not a single clock anywhere in my eyesight. If anyone wants me to finish on time, put a clock there. Someone beep every 5 minutes.
I'll come on the stage.
I don't know what wave at me means.
I'll give you a countdown. I'll give you 10-minute warning.
What I would love is a clock. I'd love a 30-minute, 29-minute, 28-minute. Is there anything resembling a clock or a watch or something? If anything, that'd be awesome. 10-minute warning I'll take, but that's all I get. There, that's perfect. That is a timepiece. That tells the time constantly. Doesn't even go off after 30 seconds if you don't use it. That's exactly what I need. Thank you. All right. So none of this is new. So what's different is what computers are doing. And I specifically speak to automation, autonomy, and physical agency. Those three things are what's changing. So traditionally, we tend to be concerned with confidentiality when you think of computer security. Now, that's just a piece of it. You remember the CIA triad? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The three basic properties we're expected to provide in security. But most of the time, we deal with confidentiality. Whenever there's a computer security in the news, invariably it is some kind of confidentiality breach. A privacy breach, data theft, data misuse. So think about, Equifax, Target Corporation, Marriott Hotels, Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, United States, the Office of Personnel Management. If these were privacy breaches, someone got hold of someone's data. The threats come in many forms. Right? DDoS attacks, ransomware. Those are both availability attacks. I can't get to my data. Someone hacks a bank and changes bank balances. It's a data integrity attack. Right? The data is wrong and I don't know how. Right? So it's not all confidentiality, but confidentiality dominates. But today, when you get to computers that affect the world in a direct physical manner, the integrity and availability threats are much worse. Right? They're much more severe because their effects are greater, because there's real risk to life and property. So, I mean, while I'm concerned that someone might, I don't know, hack a hospital and steal my private patient medical records, I'm much more concerned if they change my blood type. It's a data integrity attack. And I don't want them hacking my car, turning on the Bluetooth microphone, eavesdropping on my conversations, but I really don't want them disabling the brakes. It's a data availability attack. Right? So cars, medical devices, drones, weapon systems, appliances, power plants, smart city, anything. When you get to computers that affect things, integrity and availability are much more important. I mean, there is sort of a fundamental difference between my spreadsheet crashes and I lose my data and my embedded heart monitor crashes and I lose my life. And it could be the exact same CPU, the exact same operating system, the exact same application software, vulnerability, attack tool, exact same everything. The only difference is what the computer is attached to. Right? It's a minor difference that makes an enormous difference. And this becomes even more dangerous as our systems become more critical. So I have a seventh lesson, that computers fail differently. Now, you know, in the real world, we know how things fail. So take a car, cars have parts have, you know, mean time between failures, and parts break once in a while. And there's an entire business in your city and my city of car repair shops that handle the steady stream of cars that break. Computers don't fail that way. Computers all work perfectly until one day when none of them do. And that is a failure mode that the rest of the world isn't used to. So I'm staying at a hotel called Glass House. Weird hotel, don't stay there. But they have an electronic entry system for my room. I have a key card, I wave it in front of a reader, and the door opens. You've probably all seen them. Those systems are made, one of the companies that makes them is a company called Amity. And I think 3 years ago, someone discovered a vulnerability in Amity locks. Right? Vulnerability that you're used to allows someone to open every single Amity lock on the planet, of which there are millions of, without the requisite key card. And the way you fixed them is you went to each door manually and updated the firmware. Which means, let's face it, it never happened in most places. Because the Glass House Hotel has a way of dealing with failures in locks. They probably have a locksmith on call, lives a couple of miles away, drives in when there's a problem, brings his tools, does whatever fixing, fixes the lock. They do not have a mechanism for every single one of our hotel room doors is now broken and needs to be fixed. And it's not the way they handle failures. And the notion of a class break is something that we are used to and the world is not. So we do worry about risks that never existed before. Can someone crash all the cars? Not just that car, but every single car. Right? Can someone disable all the power plants? Right? That is a new failure mechanism. So at the same time this is happening, some of our long-standing security mechanisms are failing. I want to talk about three things that I think are failing right now. The first one is patching. So patching is how we get security. Am I rustling? I am. Hang on. This all fell apart. All right. I'm going to turn this off so I don't... Does this sound different? It's really funny. Could have said something. This being recorded? It's not. All right, so I'll tell you actually what happened. I had this attached. This must have fell off. I went to the bathroom. The microphone got stuck in my zipper. I'm telling you that because it's not being recorded, but that is actually what happened. All right. Should I just start again? I was talking about this one wasn't me. No, this is working. I don't even know what's going on. No, I don't want to hold one of those. All right. Okay, we're going to assume this works. Okay, this sounds better. All right, talking about patching. So patching is how we get security. Right? We're living in a world where software is insecure, lots of vulnerabilities, lots of bugs, and we can't do it right, so we try to be agile. Right? We try to fix things quickly. And it's really two parts to that. One is the team of security engineers at Apple and Microsoft and Google that design our operating systems and application software to be real secure. And those same teams to quickly write patches when vulnerabilities are discovered. And that works, right? That works great. But it doesn't hold true for low-cost embedded systems like DVRs and home routers. They're designed and built at a much lower profit margin, offshore by third parties. Engineering teams that are ad hoc come together, build them and disperse. There aren't engineers on call to write patches for many of these devices, like routers, like DVRs. And even worse, there's sort of no way to patch many of them. They don't have patch mechanisms. So right now, the way you patch your home router is you throw it away and buy a new one. Right? That's the patch mechanism. There isn't another one. And actually, throw it away and buy a new one isn't a bad mechanism. I mean, we actually also get security from the fact that our laptops and phones have 3-year life cycles. And we get a new one every 3 years. And that new one has better design, more security, more reliability. Right? It's a better piece of equipment. And that kind of churn also doesn't exist for embedded systems. Now, you're going to replace your DVR every 10 years. You're going to replace your refrigerator every 30 years. I bought a home thermostat 2 years ago, a new one. I expect to replace it approximately never. And that's going to be a problem. So imagine a car. You buy a car today. Software is going to make this up. It's 2 years old. You're going to drive for 10 years, sell it. Somebody else buys it. They drive for 10 years. They sell it. Probably at this point, someone buys it, puts it on a boat, sends it to somewhere in Africa, where someone else buys it, drives another 20 years. Right? So imagine you have at home a computer from 1977. Right? Try to boot it up. Try to make it run. Try to make it secure. We have no idea how to secure 40-year-old consumer software. We haven't the faintest clue. We've never had to. There's a reason Microsoft, Google, Apple depreciate operating systems after, 5 to 7 years? It's hard to maintain the old stuff. It's really hard. So do I expect Daimler to maintain a security patch test bed of 20 models times 40 model years? That'll be interesting. We can't replace cars like we replace computers. That'll cook the planet. And this is actually unsolved right now. How to deal with that kind of legacy. Decades-old computers throughout the network, unpatchable, insecure, unreliable, yet still working. Toys, appliances, consumer goods, anything. The second thing that's trying to fail is authentication. Now, authentication kind of just barely works, right? We all know this. Passwords aren't great. Two-factor is good if it's suitable. It's often not. Backup authentication systems are worse than the primaries. But the amount of authenticating we're about to do will explode exponentially. So right now, if we authenticate, there's sort of one of two things you're doing. You're either authenticating to an object, right? You log into your phone, or you're authenticating to a remote service, right? You check your Facebook. It's you authenticating to something else. What we're going to see the rise of is thing-to-thing authentication. This is the IoT. This is 5G. Things talking to things without bothering to let us know what they're doing. It's an enormous amount of promise in that, but that's going to require authentication, lots of it. Right? You have 100 things on your person, that's 10,000 authentications. You have 1,000 things, that's 1,000,000 authentications. And they're going to have to be ad hoc. I mean, think of a driverless car. It'll be driving down the road, authenticating in real time to thousands of other cars, and road signs, and traffic signals, and emergency alerts. We actually don't know how to do that at scale. I mean, right now, we can do a little bit of it. If I go into my car today, my phone authenticates to the car and uses the car's speakers. Right? That works. That is automatic thing-to-thing authentication. But if you think about that, that's Bluetooth. I set it up. Right? I paired those two devices manually. And I'll do that 10 times, 25 times. I'm not doing it 10,000 times. I'm not doing it 1,000,000 times. And I'm certainly not doing it ad hoc. So we need to figure that one out. The third thing that's failing is supply chain security. Right? So in the news this year, last year, the big supply chain story was Huawei and ZTE. Right? Should we trust Chinese-made networking equipment? Certainly a good question. The year before, the story in the news was Kaspersky. Remember Kaspersky? Should we trust Russian-made antivirus software? This is not just the US. 2014, China banned Kaspersky. They also banned Symantec. 2017, there's a story about India banning a whole bunch of Chinese smartphone apps. 2006, do you remember Mujahideen Secrets? This was an ISIS-made encryption program because, of course, they can't trust Western-made encryption programs. And I remember way back in 1997, there was debate, at least in the United States, about Checkpoint. Should we trust an Israeli security company? Now, this is just the very tip of a super complex problem. Right? Should you trust a company whose headquarters is in a country that you don't necessarily trust? Right? I mean, good question, but I see a bunch of iPhones on people's desks. Those are U.S. products, but they're not made in the U.S. Right? Their chips aren't fabbed in the U.S. Their programmers carry over 100 different passports. Right? Any one of those places can subvert the security of that. And there's more. You have to trust the distribution mechanism. We regularly see fake apps in the Google Play Store. There's an article last week in 2017. Someone slipped a backdoor into the Android software at the phone manufacturers. So it was in the master copy that was being downloaded onto individual phones. You have to trust the update mechanism, NotPetya, distributed through a malicious app to a popular Ukrainian software package. You have to trust the shipping mechanism. Remember the story of NSA employees installing a backdoor into a Cisco router intended for the Syrian telephone company? Right? This is really hard. And you can't trust anybody, yet you must trust everybody. And we have no good answer. I mean, you could imagine that the U.S. will make a U.S.-only iPhone. Probably costs 10 times as much, no one will buy it. Right? Our industry is deeply, deeply international in a way that you cannot extract. China is the only country that has, I think, a hope of doing domestic-only stuff. And they're trying. Everyone else, we are forced to trust globally. So this is, I think, a big problem. And these things are happening just as everything is becoming connected and everything is becoming critical. And we've been okay with an unregulated tech space because it used to not matter, and now it does. So I think primarily this is a policy problem. This is a tech problem, yes, but I think the policy problems are greater. And to me, the most important lesson of Edward Snowden is this. We already knew that tech could subvert policy. Snowden showed us how policy can subvert technology. Right? Both have to work or neither work. And this is what I've been working on. I just finished a book last year with the awesome title of Click Here to Kill Everybody, which talks a lot about the policy needed to bring back security. I want to talk about two basic premises. There's a lot more. I want to highlight two. One technological, one policy. The policy one is that defense has to dominate. We need to accept the fact that defense has to dominate offense. When there's a choice, we need to build for defense. Right? Building backdoors into phones is fundamentally crazy if every legislator in both of our governments carries one of them, if every nuclear power plant operator, if every CEO. Right? The danger of building insecure phones is so great that we have to not do that, even if it means the bad guys get secure phones. Right? We can no longer afford the luxury of giving everybody insecurity to catch the bad guys. That defense has to dominate in all aspects of everything we do. Right? Offense has to take a back seat. And that's a policy decision we just have to make. The engineering decision is that we need to build for resilience. We need to build for a world where insecurity is a major thing. Someone at DHS in the United States talking about 5G and the fact that China's all over 5G and maybe we can't not allow that, not have that. And what she said is that maybe we can design for a dirty network. Can we build secure systems on top of this insecure 5G network? That's an interesting engineering question. It's similar to the internet question, right? Can we build a reliable communication system on top of unreliable communications links? And that led to the internet. I think we have a similar engineering question to have now. Can we build a resilient system on top of all of these fragile pieces, all these unreliable pieces? And we kind of know how this looks. We can talk about compartmentalization and defense in depth, avoiding single points of failure, a lot of the things that we are used to. But I think we need to really start thinking about that. And there's a lot more. I mean, I could spend a lot of time on policy and legislation and what I think is going to work. I mean, the real problem is how to get from here to there. I mean, right now, the U.S. is pretty dysfunctional in terms of policy. I look more to the EU to lead. Are you people part of the EU anymore? I forget. Well, I think the EU is doing really well in both data privacy and now looking at data security. Now, I think we need more involvement of government into this. I think we have no choice. I think when computers start killing people, government gets involved. Governments regulate things that kill people. That's the way it works. And when I give this talk to your sort of typical Silicon Valley libertarian audience, what I tell them is your choice is no longer between government involvement and no government involvement. It's between smart government involvement and stupid government involvement. And that we need to think about this now before it's too late. Because I really don't see any alternatives. I mean, there isn't an industry in the past century and a half that has improved safety or security without being forced to by the government. right? Cars, planes, pharmaceuticals, food production, medical devices, restaurants, consumer goods, workplace conditions, most recently in the United States, security of financial products. Right? The market doesn't reward safety and security. The market's very short-term, rewards near-term profits. If we expect this stuff to get better, it needs to be legislated somehow. So stick with the EU, because I think they're doing a decent job. But my goal is not to be political. What will you do if, don't tell me. It's going to be dumb. So, but more generally, I think there's a call for us to get involved in politics. That right now, the major policy challenges of our century are fundamentally technological. I'm talking about computer security, and there's a lot of policy in computer security. And we'll never get the policy right if the legislators get the tech wrong. You probably didn't watch the Facebook hearings in the United States, but here we are, United States, 2019, and a legislator elected in my country asked Mark Zuckerberg, I'm actually not making this up, how do you make money? On national television. And a world where legislators don't even understand how Facebook makes money can't possibly figure any of this out. This is our expertise. I think it's incumbent upon us to start getting involved in policy, either in government, at NGOs, part of the press, full-time, part-time, lots of ways we can get involved, and we need to. Right? Because we need to get the policy right. These are complex socio-technical systems. You've got to get the tech right, you've got to get the policy right, or we get neither right. So thank you. I am happy to take questions. So they're going to put this hurtful microphone in this foam box, and they're going to fling it around.
Who's first? Not front row. Who's over here? Is the one over there? Are you ready?
That the system works at all is amazing. Now what do you do?
We'll see. So it looks like from an infrastructure point of view, we're kind of heading...
You have to speak into the box.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It looks like from an infrastructure point of view, we're kind of heading towards mutually assured destruction. Do you see that as the future? And if not, where do we go instead?
So this is actually, I worry about this and it's dangerous. So you saw the article, last week, earlier this week? I flew to Europe, so I've lost track of time. In the New York Times, that the United States has been leaving Trojans and backdoors in Russian power plants. Right? Sort of big deal. We know the U.S., the U.S. has been infiltrated, probably by Russia similarly. So that leads to what you talked about, some kind of mutually assured destruction. This feels very destabilizing. Do these backdoors, these Trojans, could they get set off by accident? What happens, right? This really feels destabilizing. But yes, I think we're now at the point where we just have to hope that we're going to do as bad to them as they are to us. Now, I hate that, right? I think it's lousy international policy, but it is what we have. Now, I visited U.S. Transcom a couple of years ago. I never heard of these people. They're the part of the U.S. military that's in charge of getting stuff to where it's supposed to go. The United States Transportation Command. If you want to have a war and you want to get, equipment there, these people do it. And largely, they use, FedEx. Not joking. And it's are you people mad? Because first thing I'm thinking, in the event that someone got hostilities with, say, China, FedEx is not going to work. Their computer system will be frozen in seconds. So I'm talking to these people, asking them, are they crazy? And said, I guess your only hope is that we're going to do just as bad to whoever the enemy is that they are to us. And that's, I think, where we are. in that attack is easier than defense, vulnerabilities are plentiful, right? That's where we are. So not happy about it, but yeah. All right, now you get to fling that to somebody else.
Okay, stick your hand up.
There's a hand down here.
That's a good catch.
Nice job. And this is your watch, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No worries. I'm actually a law student, so I feel I'm a bit from the other side of the policy debate, in the sense of I have not found a lot of experience in any level of law at the moment regarding technology. The Facebook comment about where money is made is more real than most people perhaps in this room would imagine. And I was wondering, what do you think the best way to bring such a disparate industries together is? Like, how can you bring these people to the table in a way that they're not going to just, say that you're talking absolute future gibberish?
So I think we have to, and it is future gibberish, though it's important, right? Because it's things like, algorithm discrimination, future of work, AI and algorithms, and robotics, and IoT security. I mean, these are, try to teach the legislator about blockchain. It's crazy. I teach internet security policy at the School of Government. So here I am trying to teach tech to policy students. I think we have to start doing that kind of cross-disciplinary learning and speaking. There's a bunch of different things being worked on. I know more about the United States. We have a program called Tech Congress, which is a charity that puts technologists on congressional staffs. That's pretty awesome. And we have tech-driven journalism. At Harvard, we have a joint law and computer science degree. So you can get people who know both. Right now there are exceptions. We need that to be much more common. So I don't have any single answers, but just more people who are having their foot in both. And it's not necessarily half and half. I'm teaching a little bit of tech to policy students. Similarly, there are policy classes now in the computer science curriculum. Right? So a little bit of crossover goes a long way. So, I don't blame that legislator who asked the question, but I blame his staff. Because if he wasn't told as a briefing going into the hearing how Facebook makes money, right, that's a lousy briefing staff.
Anybody else? Sorry?
Very quickly, the MI5 thing in London at the minute and how they slurp up loads of data, do you think that would be best solved by having VPNs over the top of things, or would capture of the data and then decryption later be the way that gets circumvented?
I'm in favor of VPNs. While it's certainly true that if GCHQ targeted you, they're into your computer, right? There's nothing you can do about it. Your only hope, really, is that you're not high enough on that priority list. Right? And so yes, if they wanted you, your VPN's not going to help. Right? They're into your computer, they're in the server, they've done something. But they can't do it at scale. So things like VPNs, even ubiquitous encryption, even if it's mild, prevents the attacks that happen at scale. So yes, I use a VPN all the time, and so should you. So hands back there.
I have a lot of sympathy with your call for regulation, but I'm struggling to understand how, in a world where everything is a computer and computers need to be regulated, are we going to have regulations that govern the way everything behaves? Is that feasible? Is it imaginable?
We kind of do today. Well, first give that to the person behind you, so that she's next. All right. I don't know. Probably. I think there's an open question bigger than this on how regulation happens in the information age. It's not the same as industrial age regulation. Clearly it can't be the same regulation that affects my interconnected toothbrush as my interconnected pacemaker. But it's going to be the same Raspberry Pi inside, so who knows? And maybe it is somewhat the same. How this works, I think, is a very interesting and important question I don't have the answers to. I did a lot of writing about it in my book, where I gave a straw man. But those are, I think, really important questions to ask. How do you make it work, especially when it moves so fast? You know, right now, technology moves faster than regulation by a lot. And I remember in my country, you remember drones? I remember many years where you couldn't regulate drones because the industry was just too new. And then suddenly, everyone got one for Christmas. And then it was too late to regulate drones because everyone had one. Well, that doesn't work. But something has to work. And I don't know the answer. But questions like that are important. There's a lot of questions to ask about how regulation works. In a lot of ways, it fails. I think we need to get it to work better and design for the information age. This will take, I think, new types of design. Here's my last question. Now turning off.
Hi, Bruce. Nice to meet you. You said earlier about losing your life on the internet, and we've all heard about data being the new oil. Do you feel we're at a tipping point that we have actually lost half of it?
You know, I'm not a big fan of the data as the new oil metaphor. I think data is very much the pollution problem of the information age, is the way I'll think of it.
All right, is this working? Okay, good. This is now attached to me by some way I don't understand. Certainly everybody's collecting data because there's a belief that it's valuable. But it seems like the marginal utility is less than promised. And plus, it's a huge liability. I mean, once you have data, you have to secure it or it gets lost and bad things happen. And now in Europe, you get fined. So I think we're going to move away from data is the new oil. We're not moving away from surveillance capitalism. That we really seeing a new form of capitalism based on monetizing our data and monetizing information about us. That's not changing. And Shoshana Zuboff has a great book on that, which I recommend to everybody. So yes, understanding how that market works is critical. And you know, worth reading all the details on that. All right, so I'm going to get off stage before I tangle even more microphones. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Hopefully my microphone will work here. So we thank Bruce so much, and we wish he could even stay longer, but I think you've got some other things you need to untangle yourself from your microphone. From the things I think we got from Bruce's talk, that the computers are everywhere, and we obviously need to worry about whether they're being designed correctly. The other thing, and I'm purely quoting Bruce here, that he recommended that the UK and Scotland should stay in the EU. I'm only quoting what he said, okay? It takes people from outside our country and outside our world. I think politicians don't listen to technologists enough. I may be wrong in that. I think they make wrong decisions. And the whole concept of experts and people like Bruce aren't taken seriously by our politicians. I think the world needs to grow up and actually start to put the citizen right at the heart. The EU sees the citizen at the heart and tries to address many of the problems of our industry. So thank you so much for Bruce, and thank you for coming along. Thank you to Satisnet and IBM and a whole lot of people, MBN Solutions, for enabling this event. Please go and do something. Education is the most wonderful thing that you can do in your lives. Get your kids to study like anything. Education is the key for our future. Make sure you share the education that you have. Thank you so much.
That was good. I enjoyed that.
Very interesting. Let's keep the microphone.
Eh?
You get to keep that.
No. No thanks. I've seen enough microphones in this last month.
You just wanted to get on stage.